Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update. The Afternoon Update with Lynlee Foo.
Welcome to Industry Insight on Money FM 89.3. Now, most of us think of leadership as something permanent, a CEO, a managing director, someone who's been around for years, right? So when people of such seniority leave, you would expect months of searching before a replacement is found. But that's changing. More companies in Singapore are turning to interim executives, leaders who can step in almost immediately and not just steady the ship, but push ahead with big projects like AI adoption, supply chain redesign, or even post-merger integration. It is a shift from viewing interim leaders as stopgaps to seeing them as real change makers. So what's driving this shift, and what does it mean for the future of leadership here? To help unpack this, I'm joined by Mike Magee, Managing Director for Southeast Asia at XPM. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Lynlee. Good afternoon.
Now, great to have you on Money FM. Mike, before we dive in, there was news just recently about XPM's alliance with managing consulting firm BPG here in Singapore. What can you tell us about this announcement and what it says about how interim leadership is gaining traction?
Sure, no problem at all. Well, interim executive has often been aligned with contracting, and it's never been that for XPM. We're an international business, and we put people into projects of all sorts, as you just mentioned some of them. But in Asia, we thought what we should do is we try and align much more with BPG, who are a project organization, using all sorts of different methodologies, tools, techniques to deliver successfully to clients. And what we do is we wrap our services of executive interims with BPG to make sure that we deliver above and beyond for clients. So, for instance, we do not just put in a contractor to deliver on the client side. We put in a whole series of support services around that interim to make them successful.
It's very interesting because I just can't figure out how all this works, because interim executives used to be called in mainly during times of crisis. So how has their role evolved into something much more strategic?
Well, I mean, we are still used for crisis situations. So a CFO has left suddenly, and the company needs to bring somebody in immediately to keep things running. And we do still do that. And it's in different forms. But what we've moved more into as a company is we've moved into fixing problems. And you've mentioned one, post-merger integration, market entry strategies, new supply chain, and a lot of challenges in the supply chain, new supply chain challenges. Mm-hmm. And instead of trying to pull somebody out internally to try and fix this, we bring in somebody who's got real experience, seniority, and can come in, just roll up their sleeves and make it happen. And executive interims aren't wired to serve. They're not chasing promotions or anything. Sorry, they are wired to serve. They're not chasing promotions. They're there to focus on outcomes.
Okay, so the idea is to just parachute someone in, but with the same qualities that the incumbent or the leaders who have just left might have in terms of decisiveness, adaptability, experience. But how do you actually fit them into the correct mold?
Well, I mean, that's partly our job. I mean, we have a pool of over 1,000 interims in Asia, and they're not all available to us. But when we have an opportunity, we go to that pool, to the talent pool, and we pick out those that we know that can do the job. And if they're available, then we make sure that we've got a cultural match, that they can handle the project, and that they really are literally, they roll up their sleeves and can make it happen. There's no sort of long induction program or anything like that. They hit the ground running.
Wow, amazing.
And quite often they're more senior than maybe the role requires on the ground, but they make things happen. And I think the other thing that's really important from our side is that, unlike, and by the way, my background is all my career is consulting, but instead of trying to put as many boots on the ground of the clients with lots of young people who data analytics and all the rest of it, we use the client's people to make that work happen. So we do support them with additional resources if necessary, but basically we use the client's people to make that transformation using a very top leader, and that's how it works.
Is that fairly common in Europe or America?
It's very, very common in Europe. I mean, there's a lot of reasons in Europe why it's growing significantly. One of them is that in Europe, of course, the employment laws are very challenging, so you can bring in somebody through executive interim without having to worry about employment contracts, and they do the job. But we are the largest company in France with this sort of business. We're growing in Europe as well, and we have a network of partners in Europe to deliver transnational business.
Okay. Coming back to Singapore, Mike, which industries in Singapore are relying on interim executives the most right now?
Well, we put a lot into pharma, manufacturing. We've got people deployed in financial services and oil and gas. And there's supply chain and procurement are big for us. We do quite a lot in that. And specifically, we're very, very strong in the whole area of shared services and continuous improvement.
Okay. So it's really across the board, not just one sector experimenting with this.
No, it's definitely not one sector. I mean, I have people all over the place. So, for instance, I've got a top leader at the moment running an oil and gas port in Batam right now, for instance.
Okay, interesting. Now, interim leadership is already mainstream in Europe, as you mentioned earlier. I gather that it's growing quickly in the US as well. So tell us, is Singapore simply just catching up, or does its role here as a regional hub give it a unique angle?
Singapore, as you know, I've been in Singapore 30 years now, and it's the ideal place for companies to choose interims from. First and foremost is that an awful lot of talent does not want to leave Asia, and they don't want to leave Singapore. And so instead of going back into corporate life, they decide to move into interim work, and we deploy them from Singapore. And by the way, these can be Singaporeans as well, not just expats. We have a big mix of people. And, of course, most of the MNC are here. So the work that we deploy from Singapore, they go all over Asia. And it's growing in commonality, but I think one of the things that we're seeing is we're trying to move away from that idea of contracting. We're contracting the person into us to do the job. We do much, much more than contract. We really add value to the client and to the individual to make sure that they're successful. And so it is growing in Singapore and in Asia.
And it sounds like the talent pool here is pretty deep too, if you have experienced leaders across industries and regions.
Yeah, our talent pool is amazing, actually. And some of the people I often wonder, we're really privileged to have them on our books because, as I say, they don't want to go back to corporate life. They're probably done there at the C level usually, and and in some ways they want to give something back as well. So they go in and run transformation projects, and very successfully.
Yet some companies, I think, at least to me, are still hesitant to put interim executives in charge of strategic projects. Why do you think that is?
I think they don't really. I think there's a couple of reasons. One is that they're concerned about the internal thinking about this. Will they accept somebody coming in? But interestingly, they still bring in the major consultancies who put in a lot of people to manage a transformation, and they feel more secure with that. But in fact, actually, we get better results in most cases. We put in somebody who really knows what they're doing, and I think that there are challenges. I think the human resource doesn't know about interim well enough, so quite often they get, they're looking to bring somebody in on a permanent hire, which takes a long time, and they don't normally get the right individual. And what we do is we can be deployed in weeks. But the business managers need to understand the benefits of you bringing somebody in as an executive interim, wrap around with our services with BPG to deliver a really significant result. And we do deliver really good results.
And do you think costs might be another concern? Because it can look high on paper.
No, I don't think so. If you look at the cost of bringing in a team from a global consulting company, it's huge. If you compare that to the cost of bringing in a small team and using our own people, transferring knowledge and know-how into an organization, the return on investment is very high. And by the way, we link part of our project costs against the success of the project. So we're very keen to do that. So we put in whatever the project takes. We agree a fee for that, but there can be part of that fee can be at the end of a successful project against KPIs.
Okay, so there's no long-term overhead or of a permanent hire.
No, and we're not on the payroll. It's a contract to the business, and it's 6 months is typically. We do get a lot of repeat business, which is great, but we're not on the payroll, no.
So these people are experienced, they can hit the ground running, their cost is not really a concern. So, how does this trend affect executive recruitment in Singapore?
Well, there are always going to be companies, of course, who want full-time employees at the executive level. That's always going to happen. And I think the executive recruitment market is tough. It's not my real area of expertise, but I think it's harder and harder for these individuals to get people in. But I think there's a growing, and the recruitment companies are looking at what they can do with interim, but they can't provide the services around a real interim project that we can. And I think it's a tough market for recruitment, to be honest with you. And we see ourselves as a bit of a niche. And by the way, sometimes our individuals go in to do a job and both parties like each other so much they decide to convert to full-time. That does happen with us.
Wow.
So it's a great way to get to know each other,
Okay, so you're saying that executive search firms do incorporate interim solutions alongside permanent recruitment, and over time that might become more fluid as well?
Yeah, they do. I mean, they already definitely advertise interim, but basically what they're doing is they're contracting a resource into the company, and it's the company's responsibility and the resource's responsibility to make it work. And there's no real support service from the recruitment company behind that service, whereas we are completely different. There's no one individual goes in on his own and doesn't get support from us.
Okay.
So, for instance, we would run stakeholder alignment, data and analytics, visualization, everything that makes a project successful. We are behind the client to do that. The recruitment companies can't do that.
Okay, so it's about getting the right leadership at the right moment for the right job.
At the right time, perfectly.
At the right moment, yeah. Okay, so looking ahead, Mike, do you see interim executives becoming a fixture in Singapore's corporate landscape?
Oh, definitely. We're already putting in a lot of executive interims in. Yes, I think this will become more and more common, and I think HR leaders will start using executive interims more to problem solve and also in crisis type situations. And I can see this only growing. And also there are a lot of very senior Singaporeans who are available on the market now. I mean, I think my pool in the last 12 months has probably increased dramatically with Singaporeans.
What's the mix like?
To be absolutely honest, I think it's probably about 20-80, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, thank you so much, Mike. I think this could reshape not just how companies plan leadership, but, how executives themselves plan their careers.
Yes, indeed. I mean, we spend a lot of every week interviewing new potential executives. So the pool isn't shrinking, it's growing. And we just need to get them out there into the market.
Mike Magee, Managing Director for Southeast Asia at XPM. Thank you so much for joining us on Industry Insight.
Thank you so much for listening to me. It's been a pleasure.
That was our conversation on why interim executives, once seen as stopgaps, are now shaping some of Singapore's most critical transformation projects. You're listening to Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.